The future of the census is incredibly important and just about as unsexy as an issue could possibly be. But this effort that's been ongoing for literally like 2 or 3 years now to get a citizenship question added to it is incredibly important. And that is why it is awesome that yesterday Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez spoke in a very passionate way about how questionable, how sketchy this effort has been and how much we've discovered about the motivations of the Republicans who've been pushing for it. So I want to show you a couple of videos from her appeal yesterday. First here on what was recently discovered with the death of one of the people pushing for this.
I want to know why this question was magically added after we have seen that a political operative knew and detailed an intent to intimidate racial and immigrant communities for a partisan purpose, saying this will hurt Democrats and help Republicans. That's what I want to know.
Okay, so that is incredibly damning there, that one of the people working for this, Thomas Hofeller, he, in his analysis, and we'll give you the details in a second, understood that the reason you push for the citizenship question to be asked is because you believe it will have a beneficial impact in the future on apportionment of political representation for Republicans, that it will hurt Democrats, it will hurt people of color. It's very, very clear. And so let's talk about how we know that. Mr. Hofeller, he did an exhaustive analysis of Texas state legislative districts and concluded that such maps, quote, would be advantageous to Republicans and non-Hispanic whites and would dilute the political power of the state's Hispanics. The reason he wrote was that the maps would exclude traditionally Democratic Hispanics and their children from the population count. That would force Democratic districts to expand to meet the Constitution's one person, one vote requirement. In turn, that would translate into fewer districts in traditionally Democratic areas and a new opportunity for Republican map makers to create even stronger gerrymanders. I did not know that that was possible, but they have found a way. And so effectively scaring people off from answering the census by making them think that you will be acquiring information that will allow you to get them deported is designed to make sure that Republicans and Republican generally supportive demographic groups get more power in the future. And remember, we don't do the census all the time, it's just every decade, and so that is a very durable way to manipulate political outcomes in this country. It's incredibly clear. The only reason we have that information, by the way, is that that guy kicked the bucket and his daughter, who is actually apparently a good person, found the hard drive that had this information on and released it. And by the way, that analysis where he's very clear about what the impact would be, who it would help, who it would hurt. Not long ago, the transition officer of the Trump administration responsible for census issues, that's Mark Newman, he lied to Congress about what Hofeller's results had actually been. He said that that would actually increase Latino representation in elected office. He knew it was a lie, but he lied. We'll see if there's any sort of legal consequences for that. But these are sketchy individuals. They're not the only ones though, and that's where AOC continues.
I want to know about corruption. That's what I want to know about, the racism and the very disturbing history that we're seeing here. That's what I want to know. And so we gave the opportunity to ask. We asked, why are all of these things happening? Why is all of this connected? Why are there so many people, everyone from Steve Bannon to Chris Kobach, having their fingerprints and their political intent all over the United States Census? Why? And what did we get? Nothing. No response. Stonewalling, we're getting obstruction, we're getting a lack of answers. I don't want to issue a subpoena. Nobody wants to be in a position where you have to issue a subpoena of an administration official, because we are a co-equal branch of government, and it should be expected that when we ask a question, we get a response.
Okay, she is amazing. And by the way, let's just be very clear here. The people on the internet, and I see them respond to my tweets every once in a while, who think that she was just cast into this role, that she doesn't care about politics, has no political knowledge, are literally the dumbest creatures crawling across the face of the earth, because that was fantastic. And I wish I was a tenth as good as she is. She raises a lot of good points there. Thomas Hofeller, incredibly sketchy guy to have pushing for literally years for the census citizenship question. He, by the way, had been pressuring the Trump administration to add it. Mark Newman lying about his interactions and communications with Thomas Hofeller, incredibly questionable. You've got Chris Kobach, probably the guy you should trust least in the entire country on issues of who gets to vote, whose vote gets counted, and all of that. He's been skulking around the shadows on this issue as well. Everybody basically that has touched this has been incredibly clear about what the objective is and understand what they say they want this question on there for. They say that the Justice Department needs more information so that certain provisions of the Voting Rights Act can be acted on. We've gotten this far without it on there, okay, and we have been able to implement and defend provisions of the Voting Rights Act. That has not changed. What has changed is the political futures and the political calculations of Republicans who see the demographic changes, I should say, that are happening in this country, especially in certain states. Keep an eye on Texas, and they're terrified of what is going to happen. And so they are looking for an easy get out of jail free card. And it might be that a question on the census could be that. And that is why it is so important that we have people like AOC who've been continuing to push on this issue. She wasn't the only one there. There was a lot of good testimony, and you can find it on C-SPAN. I will say that as soon as she finished, Elijah Cummings responded and was incredibly complimentary towards her on how exactly she framed this issue. So again, she, as one of the newest people in Congress, is helping to reshape the way that people who've been around for literally decades are thinking about this issue. And as sketchy as everything that I've revealed is, understand that there might well be worse stuff out there that we haven't found yet. And the reason I believe that is because, and this just happened, the Trump administration invoked executive privilege to block Democrats from getting additional documents about the census citizenship question. It is only the second time that he has invoked executive privilege to block the Democrats from getting access to documentation, and he chose to do it on this issue. That means that for Donald Trump, a guy who can hold at best two thoughts orbiting each other in his brain, this is one of the main things that he's thinking about. This is one of the main things that he is terrified of what we might discover. And considering all that we have already discovered, God only knows what is actually out there. God only knows how explicit the communications between Chris Kobach and other people involved in this effort have been over the past few years. We know what the motivation is. We know what the goal is. I don't think that we need any more crumbs in this breadcrumb trail, but it might be that others are out there. And perhaps with the continued efforts of people like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, we might actually end up getting it. Here on the Damage Report, we talk a lot about the big banks and their ways of getting rich off the poor. They saturate the market, but there are other options. And I've got info on a socially and environmentally responsible financial institution that has no ATM fees, gives you cash back on every purchase. They even commit 10% of their earnings to charity. It's called Aspiration, and if you go to aspiration.com/TYT to sign up, you'll get these perks, and that's more money to spend or to save or to spend. Just treat yourself.